Good evening. Welcome to the USS Constitution Museum's virtual open house, Sweet Connections, Strong Collections. I'm Paul George, Chairman of the Board of Trustees, and it's terrific to have all of you with us this evening. We're, of course, sorry not to be in person. We're virtual, of course, because of the pandemic, but with all the things that are happening, hopefully we'll be together soon. Things look more positive. That said, the museum has not been quiet. It's been a busy, busy place the past year. And I want to say how proud I am of Anne Grimes Rand, the president and CEO, and the entire staff for all they've done. We've had a lot of things going on. We've had many, many virtual events, both for children and for adults. We've had many grant applications go in. A lot of them have been very successful. The Leadership Speaker Series is going on and has been going on throughout the year. In fact, next Tuesday, we have Generals Mattis and Dunford coming on the Leadership Speaker Series, which we're very excited about. That's on Tuesday, the 23rd of February. We've been working throughout the year without any stops with the National Park Service and the United States Navy on the new museum, which is going to be part of the entire revamped visitor experience for the Charlestown Navy Yard. This new museum will be much closer to Constitution and to Gate 1. I think a terrific opportunity for us. And lastly, of course, throughout the year, we've made some significant additions to the collections, which you'll hear a good deal more about in just a few minutes. I'd like to take a moment, though, to thank all of our sponsors, all of you who are with us this evening, for your support, not only of the museum generally, but of our collection efforts. The Commodore's Fund is a critical part of our ability to go out and purchase additional wonderful collection items. And a special thanks to the presenting sponsors, Susan and Lou Rappaport, Vicki and Westy Saltonstall, Taylor Wagenseal, and Bill White. To each and every one of you, a special thanks for all your support. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our president, CEO, and as I like to call her, our chief historian or historian-in-chief, Anne Grimes Rand, who will give you a tour of the new collection items. And thankfully, she's at the museum. Anne, take it away.
Well, hello to all of you, and thank you for joining us this evening. Virtually is better than not at all, and we are so excited to be able to share the new collections that have come to the museum in recent months. Despite the pandemic, this has been a busy, busy time with collections coming up at auction that I never dreamed that we might see. And that's why we're here. We are here to collect the pieces of Constitution's story, the tangible artifacts that bring to life the people who served aboard and help us understand the places the ship has traveled, where she's been, what life at sea was like. It's these pieces that help us understand Constitution's sailing days. They spark the imagination, they raise the curiosity. The collections are at the heart of the museum. And that's why the Collections Open House is always my favorite event of the year. We get to share with you the newest items that have come to the museum, and we get to look at them up close and personal. Our curatorial staff has been busy bringing the new collections and getting the stories ready to share with you this evening. Of course, each new artifact is a new story to share, but the artifacts can't speak for themselves. They need interpreters, and that's what our curatorial crew will do for you this evening. They will bring the stories out of the artifacts and share them with you. That's the purpose of a museum. We collect objects and then we care for them, we protect them, we preserve them because we want to inspire the next generation of young sailors or ship designers to see these artifacts and think what they might do if they were faced with similar challenges. So this evening, we will share both the objects and the story of how we acquire objects. How do we know that something is coming up at auction? And oftentimes it's because friends like you, people who have contributed to the Commodore's Fund, might see something coming up at auction and let us know. That's what happened this fall. We learned about a great collection, a collection of over 150 documents that had been owned by James Seaver. They were at an auction house in the South we hadn't been aware of until Admiral George Emery called and said, there's a terrific collection. You've got to go for it. That happened, and another collection this fall, a pair of portraits, two beautiful portraits of a captain and his wife, came up at auction this fall. You've seen their image on the invitation to this evening's program. John Gwynn and his wife, Caroline. When that came up at auction, I have to share the story with you. I was driving home from work, 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and suddenly the phone rang. I answered. It was Sarah Watkins, our curator, always on the hunt for new artifacts. She had just learned that the portraits of John and Caroline Gwynn were coming up at auction the next morning, Saturday morning at 9 a.m. We didn't have time to go through the process we normally do. Normally, we work with our curatorial committee. We let them know about objects coming up and discuss them. Sarah and I got on the phone as quickly as we could, called the committee co-chairs who are with us this evening. We have Megan Sniffen-Marinoff and Philip Garber. And this evening's program we're dedicating in memory of Philip's brother, Paul, who was also a co-chair of the curatorial committee, who we lost recently, and another member, Gregor Trinkus Randall, who we lost recently. So they are in our memories this evening. But we reached out to our curatorial committee chairs Friday night, said, these portraits, it's not just a captain and his wife, it's a captain and a wife. We don't have their images, but we have collections of theirs. We have Caroline's writing desk and the correspondence she saved from her husband when he served aboard USS Constitution. These are portraits that we have to have. So Friday night, we're on the phone. I called Paul George. I called our CFO, Jackie. Got to get ready to do this. Called Paul. We didn't have time to plan, but Paul said to us, go for it. This is why the museum is here. We won't have an opportunity to get these collections again. Now is the time. So we marched forward boldly. By 9 o'clock the next morning, Sarah was registered for the auction. It was an online auction, so I could watch on the computer and see by 10 o'clock our item was up, see the price flashing by, and then it stopped. And I wondered, what happened? And in a moment, the phone rang and it was Sarah saying, we got it, we got it. So that's a bit of the fun behind the scenes as we try to acquire these collections. It's thanks to the support of people like you who help us purchase collections, but now we want to introduce you to John and Caroline Gwynn, who have just joined us here in Boston at the USS Constitution Museum. And to introduce them to you, Kate Monet, our manager of curatorial affairs, will take you behind the scenes to our collection storage vault, where you can see the newest addition to the collection.
Hello, my name is Kate Monet. I'm manager of curatorial affairs here at the USS Constitution Museum, and I'd like to welcome you to our collection storage space. Come on in. Our collection storage is home to about 2,000 artifacts that help us interpret the history of old Ironsides. This is a climate-controlled, secure space, and access is extremely limited, so it's really a treat to bring a virtual audience behind the scenes. Within these compact shelves, our collections are stored in acid-free boxes and also on Ethafoam on custom-built shelves and pull-out drawers. I'd like to introduce you to two exciting new acquisitions that we're thrilled to bring home to the USS Constitution Museum. This is a pair of oil-on-panel portraits of Captain John Gwynn and his wife Caroline S. Lynch Gwynn. Both portraits were completed by Thomas Sully, the renowned portrait artist. John's portrait was done in 1837 when he was lieutenant at the Philadelphia Navy Yard, and right before Thomas Sully went abroad to England. Caroline's portrait was completed 2 years later in 1839. You may notice that John has two epaulets in this portrait, despite being a lieutenant when he sat for it, and some further research will help us determine if one of the epaulets was added later on. This is the first time that we've been able to bring both a captain and his wife in portraiture to the USS Constitution Museum, and we're excited to put a likeness to two faces that we've come to learn a lot about over the years. Captain John Gwynn took command of USS Constitution in 1848 and sailed the ship for the Mediterranean, eventually anchoring in Gaeta, Italy. There, Gwynn is well known for inviting Pope Pius IX aboard as the first pontiff to set foot on sovereign American territory. His wife Caroline remained at home raising their children and taking care of household matters. We are fortunate to have in our collection Caroline's handsome writing desk, along with a collection of handwritten letters to her family and friends, including her son John. Unfortunately, Gwen also has the somber distinction of being the first captain to die while in command of USS Constitution. He succumbed to chronic gastritis on September 4, 1849, while the ship was at Palermo, Sicily. Gwen was buried with full military honors at Palermo. Caroline learned of her husband's death when she received a letter from the ship's assistant surgeon, written 3 days after his passing. In the letter, the surgeon writes, "My dear madam, the melancholy duty devolves upon me to announce to you, with the feelings of the deepest regret, the death of your beloved husband." In 1850, Gwen's remains were brought back to Philadelphia and interred at the Glenwood Cemetery. Caroline joined him upon her death in 1864. There the couple remained until 1931, when the Glenwood Cemetery was found to be abandoned and was to be razed. John and Caroline's remains were relocated to Arlington National Cemetery, but the new headstone made no mention of John's service aboard Constitution, and on the back, Caroline's name and death date were incorrect. With research provided by USS Constitution Museum staff, along with this copy of the couple's marriage certificate found in Caroline's papers, the National Cemetery had the information they needed to correct the headstones in 2016. And now the pair is together again, along with some of their personal possessions, here in the collection of the USS Constitution Museum. It's with the help of generous supporters like you that we're able to bring extraordinary collections like these home to the museum, and these stories help us bring the ship's history to life. I want to thank you for joining me in this behind-the-scenes tour of the collection vault. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
I think you can see why, when we learned that the portraits of John and Caroline Gwynn were coming up at auction, we had to act, and we had to act quickly. Because we have Caroline's writing desk, the correspondence between them when he was aboard Constitution, the desk includes the letter that she received notifying her of her husband's death at sea on board Constitution. To have their portraits come up at auction in the midst of a pandemic was just an opportunity that we had to seize. This is where the portraits belong. This is how a museum builds the story to share with the public, to help people understand. It's been true for 200 years. There are crew members who serve on board the ship, but the families of crew members also serve, left ashore, wondering about their loved ones. The power of their letters from 200 years ago are the same stories we hear today. So that is one treat that we wanted to share with you. In the spirit of sweet connections and strong collections this evening, we also wanted to share the other amazing acquisition this fall is the collection, the Seaver papers. They came up at auction this fall. As I said, over 150 documents. Normally, we are excited if we get one letter written by the captain of Constitution. In this case, the collection includes 10 letters written by Silas Talbot on board Constitution in the captain's cabin. This collection is a who's who of who served in the early sailing Navy. Nearly 50 letters with the correspondence with the Secretary of the Navy. This collection includes the construction of the first ships of the Navy, specifications of Constitution when she was under construction. It reaches into the sailing days once the ships are launched, the early patrols in the Caribbean from 1798 to 1801, even correspondence with Toussaint Louverture during the Haitian Revolution. I mean, the idea that all of these collections were coming up at auction all together at one time. When we talked with our curatorial committee, well, George Emery was the one who called us and said, this may be the best find the Constitution Museum will ever see. He let us know. We reached out to the other members of the curatorial committee, many of whom are with us this evening. All were so excited. We knew this was the moment that we had to act. This collection belongs in a public collection. It was just being sold from the family, and we had the opportunity to protect it, to preserve it, to make it available to researchers. Each of these documents, 150 stories, to be learned, to be shared, to inspire the next generation of sailors and historians. So to tell you more about this collection is our public historian, Carl Herzog, who, since we acquired the collection in October, it came to us in October just before Constitution's birthday. We celebrated her 223rd birthday on October 21st. So the collection arrived and we were doing a joint program with the ship. So Constitution's captain, John Benda, and I were on hand to open the best birthday present a 223-year-old ship could ever have. We had a big red bow and we lifted the lid and saw those letters written in the captain's cabin of Constitution. At that point, we hadn't even had a chance to read through the collection. We were just looking for the first time. Now our curatorial crew has had time to read through and study them. They're starting to process the collection. They'll catalog the collection, scan the collection, make more information available online through our blog and through our e-news features. But tonight you get the first preview as Carl, our public historian, has had a chance to read through and will share with you a few of his favorite objects from the Seaver collection. Take it away, Carl.
Hello, I'm Carl Herzog, public historian for the USS Constitution Museum. And today I'm in the reading room of the Samuel Eliot Morison Library at the museum. Here at the museum, we're constantly looking to expand both that library and the archive. New information and new sources allow us to continue to expand the story that we're able to tell here about USS Constitution. Archival material, as old as it may be, often pops up from unexpected places where it may never have been seen or available for use by the general public before. Today, I'm excited to present to you one of those finds that we've recently been able to add to the archive here at the USS Constitution Museum. This is a collection of papers that belong to Captain James Seaver. This nondescript looking box contains more than 100 documents about the early United States Navy, the construction of USS Constitution and the other 6 original frigates that belonged to the Navy, as well as extensive correspondence about the conduct of the quasi-war with France and the way the early United States Navy was operating its ships and beginning to establish its officer corps and crew. Today, I'd like to show you and share with you some of what I think are the fascinating documents within this collection that are going to allow us to help to review this history and out of it, ideally create new programming, new exhibits, and share this new information with the broader public. So let's take a look. James Seaver was born in 1761 in Kingston, Massachusetts, and joined the infantry and the army during the American Revolution. After the war, he became a merchant ship captain doing transits to Europe and the Mediterranean, but he had no naval background or experience when he was tapped to become superintendent for the construction of USS Congress in 1794. As the superintendent of construction of USS Congress, Seaver was responsible for gathering all of the supplies, equipment, stores, materials that the ship would need not only for its construction, but for its outfitting and preparation when it would eventually go to sea. As a result of this role, a number of the documents in the Seaver collection provide windows into the details of those early vessels' construction and how they were outfitted and the things that they required. A number of these documents are related, obviously, directly to USS Congress, but Seaver, in his communication with the other superintendents, also ended up with detailed documents connecting to USS Constitution that we here at the museum have not had the privilege of seeing before. These include documents like this that provide a list of the detailed and exact specifications of all of the standing rigging for USS Constitution at the time she was launched in 1797. Another document provides a list of all of the primary blocks or pulleys that went into the rig for USS Constitution. Constitution's rig and rigging changed dramatically over the 200 years that she was at sea, and even by 1812 had changed a lot from what it was when it was originally designed and built. So documents like this are offering us a window into how Constitution was set up and how Constitution, Congress, and the other frigates were being equipped and outfitted for sea at the beginning of the development of the U.S. Navy. Seaver's role as the superintendent of the construction of USS Congress was eliminated when construction of that ship and a number of the other frigates was suspended, and Seaver was out of a job. When the quasi-war with France broke out, Seaver got a position in command of the USS Herald, one of 8 original merchant ships that were converted for war because the frigates were not yet ready to sail. He sailed Herald until USS Congress was ready to get underway, and then he got the job as captain of that ship. A large number of the remaining documents are connected to Seaver's command, first of USS Herald, and then of USS Congress during the quasi-war with France in the Caribbean. Once James Seavers took command of USS Congress, he was sent to the Caribbean, where he would join up with USS Constitution and other U.S. Navy ships that were patrolling the region in an effort to capture French privateers that had been seizing American merchant ships. Hundreds of American ships had been seized by French privateers following the American treaty with Great Britain, which revolutionary France saw as an affront to previous treaties that the United States had with France. A large number of the documents in the Seaver collection include correspondence between Seaver and Silas Talbot. As the Commodore on board USS Constitution in charge of the squadron in the Caribbean, Silas Talbot was directing U.S. Navy operations there and gave specific instructions to Seaver on Congress as to where he would go and what they wanted him to do. The correspondence provides a fascinating insight into the operation of this first war and an insight into the difficulties of patrolling the Caribbean islands, which had long been a center for privateering by European nations. The revolution in France also led to an uprising among enslaved people on the French colony of San Domingue on Hispaniola in the Caribbean. The United States was supporting Toussaint Louverture, who was leading this revolt at the time. And among the papers in the Seaver collection is a letter specifically from Toussaint indicating his eagerness to work with Seaver, who had been assigned to the Cap Francois station along the coastline of San Domingue. But as correspondence between Seaver and Silas Talbot also points out, Seaver was not to engage any French naval ships as part of this conflict, but only to seize French privateers. And although he would fulfill requests of Toussaint to move supplies, provisions, and equipment, Seaver and other U.S. captains were not to accept any gifts from Toussaint, who had developed a habit of giving large quantities of coffee and other supplies to American captains who were supporting the effort. The United States Navy, Silas Talbot wrote to Seaver, could not be seen as accepting bribes of any kind in this regard. Another document I find particularly fascinating in the Seaver collection is a bill of lading for a ship that was to resupply Seaver on USS Congress and Edward Preble on USS Essex. About halfway through the quasi-war, the Naval Secretary Stoddard decided to send Preble and Seaver not to the Caribbean, but to the Dutch East Indies, Batavia, in what is today Jakarta, to search out for privateers there that were also seizing American commerce. It was a questionable mission in part because it was such a commitment of resources to send 2 ships to literally the other side of the world, when a very small percentage of American commerce was actually occurring in those islands. However, it demonstrates the logistical difficulties during that time period of conducting such a distant operation. Preble and Seaver were sent off to Batavia, but this additional ship that was laden with nothing but provisions and supplies to re-equip Preble and Seaver was sent directly after them to Batavia. The details of the document also indicate the sort of speculative nature of this kind of operation. There was no guarantee that one or either of the ships would make it, and so the orders included in the bill of lading provided the captain of that ship with directions on what to do if he got there and neither of the Navy ships was there, and how long he was supposed to wait, and how he was to dispose of the cargo. So from the construction of the first frigates of the United States Navy to America's first conflict abroad, to the revolution in Haiti, to provisions of operations, naval operations around the globe, the Seaver collection provides us with myriad insights into the early operations and development of USS Constitution, her sister frigates, and the early U.S. Navy. We're extraordinarily excited to now include this collection in our archives and make them available to researchers in the future to continue to explore this early history. Thanks so much for joining us today, and thank you so much for your support of the USS Constitution, our historical archives and research library. Thank you very much.
What an amazing collection. I think you can see why when this came up at auction, our mission is to share the stories of old Ironsides and to spark excitement about maritime heritage, naval service, and the American experience. This collection covers all of that. It was clear that this was a moment when we needed to strike to fulfill our mission. So we have been so pleased that these extraordinary collections came up at auction this fall. And despite the pandemic, while other museums have been retrenching, we have said, this is the moment when we need to fulfill our mission. We are moving forward. We are moving forward full speed ahead to collect those key artifacts that help us to bring Constitution stories to life. And the way we do that is with the support of our friends and family. So many of you who have joined us this evening and have contributed to our Commodores Fund. That has been the lifeblood of the collection. We have another story that I want to share with you this evening, another sweet connection that lurks within the stories of the museum, again, made possible by Commodores Fund purchases over the years. This is the story of purser Thomas Chew and his wife, Abby. Thomas Chew is one of my favorites because he served aboard Constitution in the War of 1812. You can follow him right through the story. Aboard Constitution for that victory over Guerriere when she earned the nickname Old Ironsides. He came ashore, transferred to Chesapeake aboard for one of the saddest moments of the war, to be captured by the British, to be a prisoner of war, freed, and then serving again on the lakes. The story of his service and the correspondence with his wife at home in Connecticut gives you the push, the pull, that timeless story of naval service, what it means to a family. And here, as we celebrate in the week of Valentine's Day, some of those sweet connections that we have come to learn through the artifacts about the stories of Constitution's crew members, past and present. I want to invite Sarah Watkins, our Chief Experience Officer and Curator, to share the story of Thomas Chew with you now.
Hi, I'm Sarah Watkins. I oversee the curatorial department at the USS Constitution Museum. The curatorial department is in charge of the acquisitions and care and interpretation of the objects in the USS Constitution Museum. These collections are the heart and soul of the museum. We're in my favorite room at the USS Constitution Museum. This is our collection storage. Sometimes we call it our vault. It is where all the objects remain before they go on display or as we rotate things on and off display. This is my favorite room because of all the items that are here. And the fact that these items are here and that they've survived all these years is miraculous. In honor of tonight's theme, I have brought some objects connected to Thomas and Abby Chew. Thomas Chew joined Constitution's crew on June 1st, 1812. He served under his friend, Isaac Hull, right before the War of 1812 was declared. In fact, it was only 2 weeks before the declaration of war when Purser Chu joined Constitution's crew. As purser, he was the accountant and chief financial officer of USS Constitution. When he came aboard, he would have brought his clothing in a bag, such as this one. This is the first object that the museum acquired over 25 years ago connected to Thomas Chu. Thomas Chu was on board the fateful day of August 19, 1812, when USS Constitution defeated HMS Guerriere. Euphoria filled the streets of Boston and spread across the country with news of Hull's victory. Hull and his crew were hailed as national heroes. Purser Chu received a silver Congressional Medal just like this one for his participation in the famous battle. Thomas Chu married Abby Hallam just 9 days later after the ecstatic parade in Boston celebrating their brilliant naval victory. The newlyweds began their wedded life in Charlestown, where Thomas served at the Navy Yard as purser. Shore duty ended when Chu joined Captain James Lawrence on the USS Chesapeake, then in Boston. On June 1st, 1813, Abby wrote her husband, never guessing that at that very moment the Chesapeake was engaged in a bloody battle with HMS Shannon. Abby wrote her husband, I continue to feel as cheerful as our separation would admit. I will not indulge myself with gloomy fears, but anticipate the pleasures of your safe return. Stationed down below to oversee the moving of the cartridges from the magazine to the guns, Tom survived unscathed, but he was present when his dying friend, Captain James Lawrence, issued his final command, don't give up the ship. When the Chu son was born the following year, they named him James Lawrence Chu. Tom's sister-in-law wrote him the news of his birth. She wrote, Abby is snugly moored in bed with a fine young purser. He arrived at a little past 4 this morning. Stationed far away at Sackett's Harbor, New York at the time, Thomas could only picture his son from the details Abby wrote to him. While there, Abby requested her husband to send home mementos from the frontier. If you can get little socks or the Indian shoes for him, he would like some. These are a pair of moccasins in the Thomas Chu collection here at the museum. These are likely one of the pairs of shoes that he brought home at Abby's request. After the War of 1812, Thomas served as purser on board USS Washington, patrolling the Mediterranean. Upon his return, he brought this beautiful coral jewelry home for Abby. It's a pleasure to share Thomas and Abby's story with you here tonight, especially in Charlestown, where they started their life as a married couple and next to the ship that Thomas Chu helped make history.
History doesn't get any better than that. The idea of Abby writing to her husband on June 1st, 1813, trying to be cheerful despite their preparation, with no realization at that moment that he was in battle against the British, soon to surrender, as James Lawrence said, don't give up the ship. I mean, it brings chills to my spine when I think about that and reading that letter of Abby's. But that's why the museum is here. We are here to collect the artifacts that bring the stories to life and let us share the stories with the next generation. And we can only do that with the support of the friends and family, all of you who have contributed to our Commodores Fund and who have enabled us to bring these stories home. I am here in the museum today, and it's a quiet museum. This is February school vacation week. A year ago, our theater was filled with kids. We have a giant tub of Lego. They were all building Lego ships. The next ship designers were there building in Lego. And instead, we've had to switch to a virtual museum. And I am so proud of the work of our staff. Yesterday afternoon, 250 of those kids who would have been building models were on Zoom with us, with a master builder from Legoland, learning tips and techniques to make their next Lego creation. And as you heard, next week, we're welcoming General James Mattis and General Dunford as part of our leadership lecture series. This museum is continuing to serve families, continuing to serve all ages. And tonight we're celebrating the collections thanks to all of you. The collections are the heart of the museum. This is why we're here. This is what fuels the stories that we share. And we are only able to do that with your support. I know by joining us this evening, you've already supported the museum, but if you are willing to support us, we appreciate any additional contributions to our collections. Tonight, you can click on the link in the chat bar or simply go to the museum's website at usscm.org/donate, and collections will go directly to our Commodores Fund to enable us to bring these incredible collections home to the museum. To be able to bring John and Caroline Gwynn home to reunite their images with the collections that tell their stories. You just heard about Abby and Thomas Chu. These are the sweet connections we can pull from our collections, but only because we have the artifacts, we have the documents, we have the primary sources that let us share Constitution stories with over 300,000 visitors each year. It's a privilege to be able to be here, to be able to share the stories of America's ship of state. We are here to inspire the next generation of sailors or maritime historians, ship designers, those who will carry forward the tradition of the Navy and keep the next generation safe so that we can all enjoy the freedoms outlined in the document, the US Constitution. I'm so pleased that all of you have been able to join us this evening for a look into our collections. Usually when we do this event in the spring, it's a warm night in May. We get to visit and you get to talk one-on-one with our curatorial staff about the collections that you have just seen. So this evening, we're going to do that virtually. And because we have a fair number of folks joining us this evening, we're going to break into a few different breakout rooms. So if you have questions for our curatorial staff, you can ask them. If you've been collecting during the pandemic, you can share your stories with us. I want all of you to know that you can be the eyes and ears of the museum, looking for the next collections that we will add to our collection here in Boston. Before we wrap up all together, I want to go to the words of a Constitution sailor who served aboard in 1814. That's Midshipman Pardon Mauney Whipple. And when he was leaving Constitution, he described his feelings about Old Ironsides. He said, "She has been a good friend to many a worthy tar and carried them through long and perilous cruises and done more honor to herself than any other ship in the Navy." And I want to offer my thanks to all of you, the good friends of the USS Constitution Museum, who have supported our collections purchases and brought honor to Old Ironsides. Now we're going to break out into conversation rooms, and it will take a moment. You will see a link on your screen, and when you press join, then you will move into a smaller discussion group. So you can ask the questions, share the stories, visit with the museum family, our friends old and new. And let me say thank you again for joining us this evening and for supporting the USS Constitution Museum's collections.